So I'm going to go over my four-pillar analysis of the water rights of the Navajo tribe. We're going to start with the first pillar. So the first pillar has to do with intersectionality, and in this case we're looking at the inequality through the intersections of race, indigeneity, and poverty. Basically the Navajo and other Native Americans do not have the same rights as American citizens. And really this all started when people started coming in, and this was called Manifest Destiny. They basically took advantage of oil and like the land and uranium, like all that, all those the resources on Navajo land, and this inequality really has to do with like the racial injustices against the Navajo. Basically we're looking at the intersectionality of these three things, of the race, indigeneity, and poverty, and when it comes to like corporations coming in trying to take their water for development, a lot of it, like, they use their poverty against them to get what they want. So it's not just like one thing, it's the intersections of these three things. The second pillar is a multiscalar analysis of the inequalities here, and this has to do with spatial analysis and temporal analysis. So we'll start with spatial analysis first. Looking at a very small scale, we look at the health issues and even deaths that Native Americans and the Navajo face due to contaminated water. Like the water became contaminated over the years in certain places from like oil drilling and the uranium mining that had gone on for a long time, not occurring anymore, but still seeing the effects of that. On a local scale, some groups in the Navajo Nation have to drive up to 100 miles a day to get clean water for their communities. So that's like on a more local scale. On a more global scale, we're looking at climate change, and climate change can really impact the Navajo and their access to water, because these places are going to keep on becoming more dry, and that's going to result in water scarcity. So these issues are just going to be exacerbated by that. And then short term, they're still fighting. Like, there's lots of settlements between the U.S. and a lot of these Navajo groups, and they're still fighting for their water rights even after some groups have actually achieved some water rights settlements. They're still having to fight against the government and corporations coming in and trying to take their water. The third pillar has to do with the social inequalities that are deeply ingrained within the state, and this, like, the state basically even reinforces this more. But this starts with the constant battle between the Navajo and state/corporate powers for more development. So to continue on with the third pillar, we have there were water rights given to the Navajo, basically acknowledging their sovereignty in the Winters versus the United States case in 1908. But they were never able to fully obtain these rights because there was no standard process or quantification of how they could obtain their water and have access to it. And so the United States took advantage of this, so reinforcing this through state power, and kind of, since there was no really system in place, even though this is under the law, they would take advantage of that and basically take water and land that way from the Navajo. In the San Juan River Basin in New Mexico, they were able to gain a settlement, and they were able to have their water rights quantified in this part of the Navajo Nation. So it can be done, and they worked through the state this way. The Navajo Nation Water Rights Commission goes in and negotiates every week, and these are just open cases that last for like years, but that's kind of working within the state. There are ways to work with outside of the state too. They mobilize through the Water is Power activist group, so there's mobilization and petitioning that way. Last but not least is the fourth pillar, and this is the indispensability, the concept of indispensability. And basically all groups should be seen as indispensable, because they are indispensable. But in this case with the Navajo, they are seen as dispensable in the eyes of the state, and they're treated as such. Their poverty has limited their access to water, because the state uses poverty against them to get what they want. So, which is unfortunate because water is the key ingredient to lift them out of poverty. To the state and corporations, profit and development of the Southwest is more important than Navajo lives, and this is perpetuated through that dispensability of the Navajo. The lack of access to water and sanitation could limit economic growth and job creation too. That's another important thing to keep in mind. So it's really hard for them to find opportunities to get out of their poverty without water.